So I'm delighted to be here to discuss my new book, The Battle for Sanskrit. This book, it's a 500-page book. It's a very analytical, academic book talking about our civilization, which has our civilization includes a lot of things, Sanskrit being the bedrock. And the book is framed as a discussion, debate between insiders and outsiders. Insiders would be people like you who practice meditation, people who do bhakti, people who do yajna, people who consider Sanskrit sacred, people who believe in the sacredness of the cosmos, people who believe that there is something higher, what is called Paramarthika, the transcendental realm, besides the Vyavarika, which is the material worldly realm. So those are insiders. The reason for this debate is because, unlike other civilizations, in the case of Indian civilization, the discourse is controlled by the outsiders. Now in the ashram it's controlled by insiders. Of course, you're very lucky. But only a minuscule percentage of the population are so immersed as insiders that they're connected. The media, the government bureaucrats, the school textbooks, academic professors, courses in humanities, these are not written from the insider perspective. Under the garb of secularism, what we have is a very Marxist, leftist, atheistic kind of intellectual regime. And if you look at where they get their knowledge from, it's a discipline in the West known as Indology, means the study of Indian civilization, started 200 plus years ago during the colonial era. And this Indology in that colonial era started creating all the knowledge about who we are, teaching us who we are. So we were taught based on the British idea or Western idea, European idea of who we are. And the traditional pathshalas and traditional authorities were sidelined. This is done as part of colonizing people. When the British left, we didn't get rid of this kind of intellectual dimension. We did not become intellectually liberated and free. So we are still intellectually colonized. And the colonial hub, the hub of Indology shifted across the Atlantic from Britain to United States. So the European Orientalism kind of faded, and there's been the rise of American Orientalism in its place. So I'm writing this book taking on some big shots. I only write books if I can start a fight. And the reason is that a goody-goody book can be ignored. I want to be non-ignorable, because when you're non-ignorable, then you start a debate, you start an argument. I want to do it with respect. I have a lot of respect for my opponents. I think they're very brilliant people. I just disagree with some of their premises, but I have no dislike for them. It's nothing personal. I want to be friends, but I want to have very strong disagreements also. So I write these kind of books where a huge change is needed. And this change will not happen in a goody-goody way. No incumbent in power just leaves on their own, especially if they've enjoyed it for so long. You have to kind of really take them on. And when you take them on, it's a kind of, they're going to come after you. So I know they're going to come after me. And I'm sort of expecting it, and that also draws them into the Kurukshetra. This is an intellectual Kurukshetra, battlefield. And so I'm also drawing them in by making a very sharp critique. There's not a single sentence of disrespect in this book. I keep on saying that these are brilliant people, but here are problems. So, if you look at who has adhikar or authority over the discourse of a civilization, you will find in the case of China, it's with the Chinese. They have all the journals in Mandarin, they have all the conferences, the prestigious places to study. In the case of Japan, it's Japanese studies, it's with Japan. Arabic studies, it's with the Arabs. Persian is with Iran, and so on. if you want to be an expert in French studies, then, France is the place to go and they have the authority. But Indian civilization is the only one studied from the outside mainly. The best places for any Indian to go get a PhD would be Harvard, Columbia, Chicago, Oxford kind of thing. And everybody wants to publish their papers in a foreign journal, and they beg to be invited to a foreign conference. So this means that we are sort of slaves to another point of view, even to be respected for our own civilizational studies. Yeah? This means that rather than being the producers of knowledge about our civilization, we become the consumers. We're consuming the knowledge somebody else produces about us. This is very strange. And we can export IT, we can export pharmaceuticals, we can export automobile technology and manufacturing, and we have this Make in India program. So why not make in India Indology? Why can't we be the world center of Indology? So I've coined the term Swadeshi Indology, and I'm contrasting Swadeshi Indology, which means indigenous, our view, with Videshi Indology, which is foreign view. So really this book is a battle between the Swadeshi and the Videshi views of Indian civilization. Now, the book started when the Videshi Indology centers in the Ivy League had reached an agreement, MOU or something like that, with the Shingeri Mutt to become the official representatives and set up Adi Shankara chairs in Ivy Leagues, controlled by people I'm criticizing as atheists, Nastika, people who are known writers and critics of the Vedic view, people who dismiss the Vedic Shruti and the Vedic sacredness, people who dismiss the sacredness in the Ramayana and see it as a political exploitation story. So why would, unless we have inferiority complex, why would we do such a thing? And so when I argued, I got attacked by people saying it's none of your business, you get out of the way, and this is our own wealthy Indians thinking they're doing a lot of good and prestige by setting up this chair for which they get accolades, which they put in millions of dollars, and they go get the blessings of some administrators in these traditional mathas. And this is what got me going. I figured I should get to the bottom of it. The one thing the investors could not answer is when I use the term due diligence. I said, have you done due diligence on these people you're investing in? And you as savvy investors have to do due diligence, and they all knew that term. And they hadn't done any due diligence. Foolishly, they showed me the press release, publicity material of the people they were investing in, and said, according to this, they're good people. And I said, you would never invest in an airline or in a hotel or an IT company or using the public relations material of those people. You have to do independent due diligence, and they hadn't. The closest term to due diligence in the Sanskrit tradition is Purva Paksha. Purva Paksha means you study the other side. You study them analytically, logically, no emotions, in a balanced way, in order to understand your opponent, and then you do Uttar Paksh, your response. So Adi Shankara, in whose name they were going to build all these chairs, he is the champion of Purva Paksha. And he did Purva Paksha with the Buddhists, with the Purva Mimamsa, with various other schools of thought. And so what an insult to Adi Shankara that you discarded his own methodology and adopted some other, the methodologies of Marxism, postmodernism, new kind of fashionable theories. So I critiqued the most powerful scholars in Western Indology today who are defining Sanskrit studies, defining they're doing the translation. Murthy has given them millions of dollars to translate hundreds of volumes into English. So the question is, what's the lens, what's the standards, what's the interpretation with which they're doing it? And there's nobody who has really bothered to raise this issue. So it's sort of a one-man, campaign, but it's working. Because in this tour, wherever I've gone, I've addressed traditional scholars. They appreciate my concern. They support me. They've offered help. Many Sanskrit universities have told me that they will assign their best scholars to work with me. So I want to train a home team of intellectual Kshatriyas, people who are grounded in our tradition, very solid Sanskrit and knowledge of texts. I will tell them what the opposing side is saying and ask them to give a response. So I will play the role of the opponent and have them debate me. This way we train them. So we're going to start this in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. We're going to start a project and bring in some bright people and get them going into this Purva Paksha of Western Indology. You cannot give a response unless you have understood them and studied them in the Purva Paksha first. So my book also analyzes why several hundred years ago we stopped the Purva Paksha tradition. I mean, when the early Christians came, there was no critique of them. When Islam came, there was no systematic critique. When colonialism came, when Marxism came, when post-colonial studies has come, there is no traditional Indian critique of these, which is required as per tradition. We are supposed to give a critique. Our scholars are supposed to give a critique. And I scolded them and I said, I don't want to blame the opposing side for doing what they are doing because it's natural for them to do what they are doing. I'm criticizing our traditional people for not giving a response, and they accepted it. It has to do with funding, it has to do with not knowing English, it has to do with a lot of reasons. And we're trying to fix that. Now, even before the book came out, 6 months before, I discussed it at the Thailand World Sanskrit Congress, and immediately the attack started. Immediately they sent petitions to my publisher asking them not to publish it, to ban all my books, accusing me of all sorts of things to prevent my freedom of speech. And these are the same people who champion the free speech. Of course, it depends on whose free speech they're championing. So I must tell you, a lot of people in Art of Living supported me in this campaign. We did a counter petition. The petition against me had 250 signatures by eminent scholars and Indologists and the petition for me, the counter petition for me, was common people, practitioners, traditional scholars, mathas, Art of Living people, and we had 11,000, so 40 to 1. 40 to 1. Yeah? So they kind of run off, and then the fight started until the book got printed. They were lobbying with the publisher to stop it. Once it went to the press, and they had to stop the press because of some issue that came up. I was brought back from a holiday in Florida, middle of the night, because the book printing had stopped. So I was very worried. So until it actually happened, I didn't know what's going to happen. So the mere fact that this book is out itself means we won the first battle of Sanskrit. Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about what some of the issues are. The most important point of disagreement is over the sacredness of Sanskrit, Vedas, Puranas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Yajna, Mantra. The opposing camp, the preeminent Western Indologists, deny the sacredness. So it's an atheistic view. It's a view that says this claim of sacredness is to exploit. It's a primitive view. It's backward. It's irrational. All the things that atheists would say. And it's fine for people to say that. There are people who say that of Christianity, of every religion. What is not fine is to give them the adhikar and the control to run the show. It's okay for them to say that, but it's our people who are from within the tradition that ought to control it. So it's establishments like this we are in that ought to be the centers of Indology. So one of the reasons I'm here is I want to convince Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, I want to convince major Hindu organizations and traditional centers of learning that we have to come together and create Swadeshi Indology University here in India and train our people to become the leaders in this kind of an intellectual battle and not be consumers of what somebody else is writing. This is an important goal I have. So the Vedas talk of Paramarthika, which is the transcendental realm, and Vyavaharika, which is this worldly realm, and these two are integrated. You can't remove one or the other. The school of thought I'm critiquing have come up with the conclusion that the Paramarthika realm is full of abuses and it is irrational, it's unscientific, you can't prove it. And the voice, the authority they rely on is a 17th century Italian named Vico. Now, when I asked our traditionalists to give a response, they never heard of Vico. So they said, we have to spend a long time studying who's this Vico, we have to read his books and translate them and understand them, and then we can respond. So the idiom, the style of language in which we are being studied by the West is such that our own traditional scholars don't have access to it. So it's unfair. It's like somebody talking about you in a way that you don't even know what they're saying. So this is how bad the situation has become. The top three thinkers whose theories are being cited by the group I'm critiquing are Vico, Benjamin, Gramsci. None of our people heard of them. Yeah. They say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So either they'll ignore, our people will either ignore, or insult, or be bombastic, or acquiesce and give in and join the other side. None of those is acceptable to me. I want a calm, cool-headed, analytical, rational response. Take them seriously and give a response, point by point, and treat them with respect. So, in the past, there used to be a school of atheists called Charvakas. How many of you have heard of Charvakas? Okay, I'm very happy. Then you've got a nice audience here. Charvakas are people who dismiss the Vedas, dismiss the sacred, and that's similar to these guys. So I call them the return of the Charvakas. The Charvakas are back. The left is Charvakas. Okay? The atheists are Charvakas. They are Charvakas 2.0. And the reason is they're more sophisticated than the 1.0 Charvakas. Because they got a global access, they are globalized power, they have a lot of money, they have institutional clout, politically well positioned, very articulate, sophisticated, and so on. And they can cite that 500 years of atheistic science has produced so much results. That is true. I mean, cell phone and microphone and airplane and computers and automobiles, none of them rely on anything sacred. The non-sacred science, the secular science produce all these benefits. So they can, unlike the Charvaka 1.0 who had nothing to show off, these guys have a lot of technology. So they're very sophisticated and in arguing against the sacredness. And so we cannot dismiss them. But we have a very strong case, we just need to articulate it. And this is what I'm trying to get our own scholars up to speed so we can respond. Not only do they remove the sacred, they add in its place social oppression inherent in the Indian texts as their claim that this is basically social oppression, and political domination as the reason and motive and agenda for these texts. So in other words, they are insinuating there's nothing sacred, it's all hocus pocus, whatever they're saying. All this has been going on for thousands of years to exploit people. And for the king to become powerful, for the Brahmins to claim superiority and to be hegemonic and oppressive against various other people. So the byline of the book, that in the front cover, underneath the battle for Sanskrit, it says, is Sanskrit political or sacred? They would say it's political, I would say it's sacred. Oppressive or liberating? They would say it's oppressive, I would say it's liberating. Dead or alive? They say it's dead and I say it's alive. Now, this business of alive, Sanskrit is not just a language, it's also Sanskriti, a way of life, dance, music, architecture, yagna, philosophy, mantra. So Sanskrit permeates all these things. And it lives through these things. It's like the architecture out of which come all these manifestations of that same architecture. So I am perfectly entitled to saying that as long as all these things are alive, Sanskrit is alive because it is the foundation and basis on which all these other things thrive. So I feel Sanskrit and Sanskriti are very much alive. I don't like the term classical language because classical language refers to Greek and Latin, which are dead languages, killed by the Christians. Those civilizations civilizations were killed by Christianity, and they are now sitting in a museum, and they are praised and respected as sort of, this is what it used to be, but they're dead, and we can sort of give them a little bit of honor. Those are not living civilizations. I prefer the model of Mandarin studies, which is ancient but also living, and they don't call it classical. Persian, which is ancient and living. Arabic, which is ancient and living, and so on. So I prefer that Sanskrit and Sanskriti studies methodology should not follow the Western pattern of classical languages, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Those classical languages are dead, and I just don't think we should engage in that. Now, a very major difference is between their views and my views is that they consider the oral tradition to be not relevant, not important, not able to innovate. They're saying that history starts with writing, and so everything that happened in the oral era is not history. I mean, those things are just discarded. But while that may be true of the West, it's not true of Indian civilization. Look at the beautiful music being played. There are no written scores. You can't say music hasn't evolved and innovated just because it's not a written system. West, it's written scores. You play from written scores. Our greatest musicians don't use written scores. So it's an oral tradition. Yoga is an oral tradition. The yogi doesn't have to read anything. The meditation is an oral tradition. You do not need to read a book on meditation to be a greatest meditator. You see, cuisine, the great chefs in India don't read a recipe book like, so many grams of this and for so many minutes put this in 30 degrees and all that. They don't follow a recipe. They're not mechanical. It's improvised. It's from within. So all dimensions of our Sanskriti are deeply oral and embodied. It's the body that transmits from guru to shishya. So dismissing the oral tradition is a very big violence as far as I'm concerned. I would never accept that. Now, then the theory comes, the death of Sanskrit, that Sanskrit died 1,000 years ago and it was killed by Hindu kings, and Muslims tried to actually save it, but the Hindu kings would not cooperate. This is a theory, because they're very politically correct kind of people. Okay. And then Ramayana, the theory on Ramayana is that until 1,000 years ago, when the Turks invaded India, prior to that, Ramayana was not a big deal in the Indian public. There was really not a big Ram Bhakti going on. And when the Turks invaded, the Hindu kings need something to unite the public against them, and they needed a narrative to make them look like demons and make themselves look like divine. So Ramayana was suddenly popularized and mobilized as a political weapon for the kings to appear divine and to project Ravana and Rakshasa and evil demonic ideas onto the Muslims. So this theory has been built, and the people who theorize this say that this, for the last 1,000 years, Ramayana has been, to paraphrase it by words, a weapon of mass destruction. Because whenever there is a need to go kill Muslims and do violence, they invoke Ramayana because it has this kind of a story built into it. And therefore they interpret that contemporary Hindu-Muslim issues that go on are all because Ramayana is meant for that. Very interesting, very interesting. They also say that there is a theory called deep Orientalism, according to which the European exploitation of others, which is the intellectual part of it, is called Orientalism, the study of others as inferior, in a romantic, patronizing way. They're saying that these ideas the Europeans got from the study of Sanskrit. That Sanskrit had in it ideas on how you discriminate, how you oppress, how you suppress. And so Sanskrit oppressiveness, the texts of Sanskrit had built-in oppressiveness. When Westerners came and studied Sanskrit, they got these ideas and they became racists. In fact, it goes on to say that the German Nazism, Holocaust, has something to do with their study of Sanskrit, because these ideas of violence on a large scale were already contained in Sanskrit, And so they accuse Sanskrit, insinuate Sanskrit as a sort of cause of these kind of problems. Now every insider would have a problem with this. It is a tragedy that these things have gone on for the last few decades. It is not their fault. They are entitled to it, freedom of speech. They are entitled to writing all these things. It is a tragedy that our people have never understood it, they never responded to it, and we are glorifying them. We are giving them Padam Shri and Padam Bhushan and giving them millions of dollars of awards and inviting them to take over the intellectual discourse of our most important Peetams and Matthas, and some ill-informed NRIs are out there raising millions of dollars to fund chairs. There are some organizations doing that. So this is the problem I have. I want not only the insiders, the home team, to refute all this. I want us to study our Shastras as repositories of knowledge, repositories of science. Now, while we are being denigrated on the one hand, on the other hand, there is a huge grand theft of Shastra and intellectual property quietly being siphoned off and repackaged into Western frameworks. For instance, cognitive science, neuroscience, the cutting edge they do is based on the study of Buddhist meditators and Hindu yogis, and new theories are coming on the state of minds and all the consciousness studies, where they don't acknowledge the Hindu or Buddhist origins. They sort of secularize it and turn it into a new science that they claim. So for instance, Yoga Nidra has become lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming. It's a very big industry. And Vipassana is mindfulness. So I'm writing a book called The Mindfulness Industry. It is the industrialization of meditation. A kind of industrialization. And decoupling it from its source, traditions. And yoga first got decoupled from the Vedic traditions, and it decontextualized, and now it's being recontextualized into Christian yoga. So there's a lot to do if we could put together a team of insiders taking on this discourse. So I'm one of the theories I'm very impressed by, because I'm actually very impressed by the scholarship, by the hard work, the rigor of these people. One of the most impressive theories that they have developed, which I explained in my book in detail, and our traditional people never heard of such a thing even, and it's about us, It's called the aestheticization of power. Aestheticization of power. Okay, I'll explain to you what it means. It means that it's not like brute force power, which is very visible power, but this is power through, in a very aesthetic way, poetry, drama, where, power is being imposed on you in such a nice, elegant way that you don't even know that power is being imposed on you. So it's like somebody who, kind of exploiting you, but also very respectful, very polite, and the aesthetics with which they are behaving is so nice that you are mesmerized. You are very impressed by the diplomacy of the whole thing. Now, this theory of the aestheticization of power started in the Nazi era. Marxists did not know why the proletariat did not uprise in a communist revolution to overthrow the ruling elite. They had done that in Russia. In Russia, Lenin had made a communist revolution because the economy was bad, there was unemployment, people were poor and hungry, so he convinced them to rise up and overthrow, and there was a communist revolution. Germany had similar economic depression, but there was no communist revolution, and they were wondering why. And how did the Nazis come? The Nazis, so rather than overthrowing the elite, a new elite replaced the old elite. So in Nazism, a new kind of elite came and replaced the old elite. The Marxists had to explain why is this so. Traditional Marxism was unable to explain such a thing happening. So this theory of aestheticization of power was developed by Benjamin and others, and this is called the Frankfurt School of Marxism. This is a theory. Now the theory is that Nazis were successful because they aestheticized their power with parades, national songs, lot of drama, theater. They funded art about the greatness of the Third Reich. So they made people feel patriotic. So by giving people a sense of, like India shining, that kind of a thing, by giving people a sense of big, we're doing so well, people forgot their hunger, people forgot their economic plight, and people just went for the aesthetics with which this narrative was being presented. So narrative presented through poetry, art, music, drama, parades, all these symbols of greatness, we're doing so well. North Korea does that, by the way, now. They do that. So this is a very brilliant theory. The aestheticization of power is a way you can keep people under your spell, even if they're very poor and doing very poorly. Okay. By using aesthetic methods. This aestheticization of power was designed for one purpose. But then Indologists wanted a theory to explain how did Sanskrit spread across South Asia and Southeast Asia for 1,000 years without military conquest. How did it happen? So they started using this theory of the aestheticization of power and said Sanskrit spread because the king could use kavya, poetry, to aestheticize his greatness, his grandeur, all these pageantry of performing Ramayana, all kinds of performances of symbol jagnas, was basically to dominate over you, to make the person performing seem grandiose, divine, powerful. So all this is to hypnotize the public. According to which, when you go for a yagna, those guys are trying to basically put you down and you have to look up to them. They are the big shots. That is the message being given. And the portrayal of the king and all that in Ramayana and so on is designed to kind of keep the proletariat, keep the public happy and contented in their own low level, at a lower level of position. So what it amounts to is that the Brahmins and the kings had a conspiracy to exploit other people, and this is why Sanskrit spread. Sanskrit was a tool, a development tool, like you have, Microsoft has development tools, and if you use the development tools, you can build a lot of apps. So Sanskrit was a development tool, so that, and the Brahmins developed this tool and franchised it, licensed it to the kings, and they could use it to build apps, and then these apps would give awe and power to the ruling elite. So the theory of the aestheticization of power is a theory that gives a certain political motive to Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts and Sanskriti, and removes the sacredness as a purpose. Its reason for spreading had nothing to do with sacredness. I claim that it spread because it brought sacred meaning to people's lives. The reason people adopted Yagna, and the people they adopted Jyotish, and they adopted Ram Bhakti and Ram Leela and all these things, is because it brought meaning to their lives. It's not some kind of exploitation going on. So the insider view and outsider view, I'm making it very sharp. I'm making it sharp, and I'm inviting a debate. Now this cannot be done by me alone. Obviously I'm outnumbered and outfunded, and also those guys are very brilliant. I accept that. They've studied this field a lot longer than I have. So I'm looking for, in this tour, I'm looking for allies. I'm looking for traditional scholars, and I'm finding allies. They're very happy that somebody's speaking up, somebody's saying what's in their heart, but they're not able to articulate it. So it will take me about a year to create a home team of traditional Sanskrit scholars. I expect 3 kinds of teams, 3 levels, A, B, and C, just to give some names. A are people who are from Sanskrit universities, they're traditional Sanskrit people, they don't know English, they don't understand these opponents, I have to do that for them. And then this book is a starting point, and then they can give more responses. That's the A part. B are English-speaking, westernized public intellectuals, the people who go to these literary festivals, who are supposed to be the smart guys in the media, people who are writing books and so on. So a lot of us are English-speaking type people. So how to make them join my home team? They are not the ones who are necessarily going to do the heavy lifting in terms of Sanskrit responses, but they have a large role to play in packaging our response, making it user-friendly, and marketing it. So that's kind of B level I need a large number of those people on my side. And C are the social media. They can go, do all kind of stuff on social media. They're not writers either in Sanskrit nor in English. They're not writing at all. Their vocabulary, their writing skill is 140 characters, but they're useful, and they're really not intellectual Kshatriyas. They're more like emotional Kshatriyas. They're more like emotional kind of stuff. We have to channel it. We have to keep it contained and disciplined. We don't want to get it out of hand and say, make rowdy, rabble rousing. We don't want that. But we want them to be able to express a voice. So that's my plan. And I would like to take questions now. And thank you very much for listening.